My parents forced me to buy a house for the golden sister, but when I bought it for myself, they started accusing me of betraying the family. Hello, Reddit. I've known for as long as I can remember that my sister Melanie was the favorite. I don't say that bitterly. Okay, maybe a little bitterly, but more like someone pointing out that the sky is blue. It just was. From the time we were kids, it was obvious. She was younger, softer spoken, more prone to tears, and according to my parents, more sensitive and vulnerable. That word followed her around like a protective bubble, while I got phrases like, he's a boy, he can handle it, and life's tougher for men, better to learn now. We're only 3 years apart. I'm 31 now, and she's 28. But when we were growing up, the gap felt enormous because of how differently we were treated. I got hand-me-downs, chores, lectures. She got brand new clothes, weekend ballet classes, and a passport full of stamps by the time she was 12. She went to Florence with our mom when she turned 15, and I stayed behind to hold down the fort. That was code for mowing the lawn, helping Dad clean the gutters, and making dinner twice a week. Our house wasn't rich, but we were comfortable. My dad worked in finance, and my mom was a part-time interior designer who mostly worked with her friends and made Pinterest-worthy throw pillow arrangements. My parents always said they believed in working for what you get, but that rule seemed to apply only to me. When Melanie got a C+ in algebra in 8th grade, they hired a tutor that week. When I got a B in chemistry and asked for help, I got told, "Travis, you need to buckle down and stop expecting handouts." It's not like I was a bad kid. I stayed out of trouble, did okay in school, played JV soccer, worked weekends at the grocery store during high school. I even helped Melanie with her homework when she was too tired after her dance rehearsals. My reward? Travis, be nice to your sister. She has a lot on her plate. Always her. Her stress, her schedule, her needs. Mine were invisible. There was this one summer when I was 17. I wanted to go on this wilderness trip up in Oregon, backpacking, rock climbing, the whole outdoors thing. I saved up for months. When I finally had enough for the registration fee, my parents told me, "You need to contribute to the family vacation fund instead." That year, we went to Italy. You can probably guess who picked the destination. While they toured Tuscan vineyards, I stayed back with our cousins in Ohio because someone had to watch the dog, and Travis, you're good with the cousins anyway. Melanie brought me back a keychain that said CIO in glitter. I never used it. College? Different world entirely. I went to a state school, paid my own way, worked 2 jobs, and took 6 years to finish. Melanie? She got into NYU, and suddenly my parents found enough money for tuition, housing, and even a semester abroad. She can't juggle school and work the way you can, my dad said. She's not built like that. Right. Because I'm apparently made of granite and don't need support. The part that really stings? They were proud of me, but only when it was convenient. Like when I got promoted at work and bought a used Mazda, my mom posted a picture of it on Facebook with the caption, "Our hardworking boy." But the comments were all about Melanie's latest gallery showing in Soho. It was like I existed just enough to serve as a backdrop for her spotlight. One Thanksgiving a couple years ago, I brought it up. We'd just finished dinner. Melanie was buzzing on her 3rd glass of wine, going on about how exhausted she was planning her art exhibit. I'd cooked the turkey, helped Dad fix the garbage disposal that morning, and still got stuck washing dishes. I was tired too. I made a quiet comment, something like, "Must be nice not having to worry about anything but paint colors." It wasn't even that harsh. But my mom turned to me, eyes narrowed, and said, "That's enough, Travis. Don't bring your jealousy to the table." Jealousy. That word hit me like a punch to the ribs. I wasn't jealous. I was just tired. Tired of being the background character in my own damn family. Tired of hearing about Melanie's struggles, her triumphs, her feelings, while mine were always just part of growing up. Even now, we're adults and nothing's changed. Melanie's had 3 different apartments in Manhattan, paid for, in part, by early inheritance that I was told wasn't the right time for me to receive. She calls them loans, but I've never heard a single word about repayment. Meanwhile, I rent a 1-bedroom outside Milwaukee and drive that same Mazda. I know some people might say I should let it go, that I'm a grown man now and I shouldn't care. But how do you let go of a lifetime of being the afterthought? Of being told in 1,000 little ways that you matter less? That your needs come second, third, maybe not at all? There's no dramatic ending to this. No blowout fight or teary reunion. Just this persistent, quiet truth that I've carried since I was old enough to notice who got the bigger piece of cake. I don't hate Melanie. I don't even blame her. I blame the way our family decided, early on, who was fragile and who was expendable. I was never the golden child. I was the gravel under their path, expected to stay in place while she walked forward. By the time I was 16, I was already juggling 2 jobs, stocking shelves at the local grocery store on weeknights and bussing tables at a family diner on weekends. My friends were out doing normal teenage things, like going to movies or playing video games after school, but I was learning how to get stains out of polyester uniforms and budgeting my tips to the exact dollar. My savings account wasn't for fun or for a car. It was my lifeline, my future college fund, because I knew no one was going to cover that for me. At the exact same time, Melanie was picking out the color of her graduation gift. A brand new Honda Civic, metallic blue with leather seats and a Bluetooth stereo. I still remember the way my mom beamed handing her the keys, like she was presenting a crown to a princess. Dad had filmed the whole thing on his phone, narrating proudly while Melanie squealed and hugged them both. I had just gotten home from a 6-hour shift and watched from the front porch, still in my work apron, smelling like fryer oil. No one asked me to join in. No one asked if I needed a ride. I was still biking to work on a used Schwinn with duct tape on the handlebars. When I graduated 2 years later, there was no party, no car, not even a family dinner out. Just a congrats and a card with a $20 bill that I suspect was more of a guilt offering than a celebration. I packed my things that summer and moved into a crumbling house near campus with 5 other guys, all crammed into what was basically a moldy shoebox with bedrooms. The kitchen faucet leaked. The walls were thin enough to hear someone coughing in the next room. My mattress was on the floor, my desk was a folding table from Goodwill, and my laptop, used and 2 generations behind, overheated if I had more than 2 browser tabs open. Still, I made it work. I picked up shifts at a bookstore near campus and delivered pizzas at night. Every dollar went to tuition, textbooks, rent, and the cheapest food I could find. I got used to ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, and discount rotisserie chickens that were a day from expiring. My parents never asked how I was managing. They never offered to help. When I once mentioned that my laptop was on its last legs, my mom said, "Maybe it's time to save up for a new one," as if I wasn't already scraping every spare cent just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Melanie had moved into an apartment in the city paid for by my parents. She was studying photography at a private art school, tuition covered, of course. My dad liked to joke that Melanie's got the eye and that she needed the right environment to thrive. That meant an overpriced loft with exposed brick, a monthly stipend, and a shiny new MacBook, because she needs it for her portfolio. I saw the Instagram posts, her coffee table books, her avocado toast breakfasts, her weekend getaways to Montreal and Palm Springs. And I sat at my sticky kitchen table under a flickering ceiling light, typing out essays with frozen fingers because our heat barely worked. There was a point during sophomore year when I actually ran out of money completely. My roommate at the time had dropped out mid-semester, leaving me to cover both our shares of rent or risk getting evicted. I called my parents, not even to ask for the full amount, just to borrow a few hundred to get through the month. My mom said, "That's not really something we can help with right now," and then launched into a story about how Melanie had just started an internship and they were going to help her with new camera equipment. I thanked her anyway and hung up, my throat tight, then took on an overnight warehouse job for the next 6 weeks just to stay in that dump of an apartment. Every time I saw Melanie over the holidays, she would go on about how stressed she was with her projects, how exhausting her life was, how she just wanted to disconnect from all the noise. I'd smile, nod, pretend to understand, while knowing she had never once had to ration groceries or calculate whether she could afford laundry detergent this week. I wasn't just carrying my own future. I was dragging it uphill while watching my sister float on a cushion built out of my parents' blind favoritism. It wasn't jealousy. It was exhaustion. It was watching someone get handed every possible resource while I was told to learn to hustle. It was watching Melanie post about independent woman vibes while our parents paid her rent. It was standing in the checkout line with a calculator app open while she ordered cocktails that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I worked harder than I thought I ever could, and I still never felt like I was catching up. The world wasn't unfair. It was my own family that had drawn the lines, handed her the map, and left me to find my way in the dark. After college, I didn't follow the neat, paved path that most people in my family expected. I didn't go into finance like my dad or marketing like a few of my cousins. I didn't even try to climb some corporate ladder. Instead, I took everything I had, savings from years of delivery shifts, summer warehouse work, late-night tips from pizza runs, and I opened a tiny, beat-up auto repair shop on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, it looked like the kind of place most people would drive past without a second glance. The sign was faded, the garage doors creaked, and the plumbing in the bathroom made weird noises if you flushed too hard. But it was mine. The first year was brutal. I spent more nights sleeping on the old pull-out couch in the back office than I did at my apartment. I did oil changes for $30 just to get people in the door, rotated tires for free, and practically begged locals to give me a shot. There were days where I went without a single customer, Just sat in the bay wiping down tools or scrolling through Craigslist trying to find cheap parts. Other days were chaos. Engines I couldn't diagnose. Angry clients who thought I was trying to rip them off when I wasn't. And more than a few moments where I thought I'd made a huge mistake. But slowly, things started to shift. Word got around that I was honest and didn't overcharge. A couple regulars came back, then brought friends. A retired guy named Don who lived a few blocks away started telling people at his church about me. A single mom who came in for a break job ended up recommending me to her entire office. Little by little, I built a customer base. I stopped living off gas station burritos. I hired one part-time mechanic, then another. By year 4, I was finally paying myself more than minimum wage, and by year 5, I was making enough to stop holding my breath every time the rent for the shop came due. It wasn't flashy money. I wasn't driving a Tesla or flying anywhere for vacation. But for the first time in my life, I had a steady income, savings, and something to show for all the nights I spent sleeping under fluorescent lights or eating dinner out of a vending machine. I'd never felt proud of anything the way I felt proud of that shop. Every tool was in its place because I put it there. Every light that worked, every repair that held, every repeat customer. I earned all of it. About a year after things stabilized, I started saving for a house. Nothing massive. Just a modest 3-bedroom on the edge of the neighborhood where I grew up. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not because I was hiding it, but because I knew that saying anything to my parents usually meant the conversation would somehow turn into a comparison between me and Melanie. Still, one day, during a phone call with my mom, just the usual small talk and weather updates, I mentioned offhand that I'd been pre-approved for a mortgage and was thinking about putting a down payment on a house soon. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "Oh, wow. That's great, honey." The tone said more than the words did. That subtle shift, like she wasn't quite sure how to process the idea of me being financially stable enough to own property. She didn't ask for details. No, what kind of house are you looking for? No, how many bedrooms? Not even a congratulations. Just a quick pivot to how Melanie's landlord had raised her rent again and how unfair that was, especially considering how hard she works in that industry. I didn't push it. I just nodded along and let her talk. I knew better than to expect enthusiasm. For years, my accomplishments had been treated like minor footnotes while Melanie's were full chapters. But it still stung a little. I was doing something big, something real, and the only reaction I got was lukewarm acknowledgement followed by a sigh over how my sister's artistic journey was being so misunderstood by the world. Still, I kept saving. I kept working. The shop stayed open 6 days a week. I kept doing oil changes, brake pads, tire rotations, engine rebuilds, anything that kept the doors open and the lights on. Because even if no one in my family seemed to care that I had made it this far on my own, I knew what it took to get here. And I wasn't going to let that be overlooked just because I didn't come wrapped in the same shiny packaging as my sister. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a background noise you don't notice until it gets louder, and suddenly you realize it's been there the whole time. Every time I called home or visited for a quick lunch with my parents, there would be these little remarks, always centered around Melanie. I'd be telling them about something at the shop, how I'd finally upgraded the lifts or how we'd gotten a glowing Yelp review from a customer who'd been burned by every other place in town. And my mom would smile and nod, but then inevitably tilt her head just slightly and sigh, as if the weight of the entire world rested on her shoulders. "Melanie is having such a hard time," she would say. "The rental market is crazy right now. Everything's so expensive in the city." At first, I didn't think much of it. I'd just nod and go back to whatever I was saying. But then it kept happening. Every phone call, every visit, every text thread that drifted even slightly toward real estate or finances, there it was again. My sister's rent going up, her neighborhood getting louder, her need for a little breathing room. My dad joined in too, though more subtly. He'd ask how business was, then comment that it was so impressive how self-made I'd become. But then, in the same breath, he'd mention that Melanie was trying to get back on her feet after some setbacks, and that not everyone's path is the same. It was never direct. No one said, "Travis, can you help your sister with money?" That would have been easier to deal with. What they did instead was worse. They hinted. They planted seeds. They'd say things like, "Melanie's lease is almost up, and she's so stressed trying to figure out what to do next." Or, "It's so unfair that she has to worry about rent when she's trying to focus on her art." Once, my mom actually said, "I just wish someone in the family could give her a little stability." Someone in the family. Not naming names, of course, but looking directly at me across the dinner table as she said it. The worst was when they framed it as if I'd naturally be willing to step in. My mom once said, "You've got that whole house to yourself, don't you? Must be quiet after working all day." Then she paused, long enough to make it clear that the sentence wasn't finished. Melanie's apartment is above a bar. Can you imagine trying to sleep through that? I just kept chewing my food, pretending I didn't hear the implication, even though it was echoing in my head louder than the clink of her fork on the plate. There was never a conversation about what I had done to get where I was. No acknowledgement of the nights I slept in my office chair because I couldn't afford to lose a customer to a missed early drop-off. No mention of the student loans I'd paid off without help, or the fact that my down payment had come from 7 years of grinding without a single vacation. Instead, the focus was always on Melanie. Her struggles, her feelings, her potential. My role, it seemed, was to be the safety net. And the most frustrating part was that they made it sound like it was my idea. "You've always been so responsible," my dad would say. "You're in such a good place now." And then, after a pause, "Not everyone's as fortunate." As if fortune had anything to do with it. As if I'd just stumbled into stability while Melanie had simply been unlucky. Like the years I spent cleaning grease off my hands and fixing busted radiators were some kind of lottery prize. No one ever asked me if I had dreams beyond keeping the shop afloat, or if I ever wanted a life that didn't involve bailing out other people from decisions they made and consequences they refused to accept. They didn't see me. Not really. They saw a tool, a resource, a way to smooth over the cracks in Melanie's carefully curated world without getting their own hands dirty. And somehow, they expected I would volunteer for that role with a smile. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring, the kind where everything feels deceptively calm. I had driven over to my parents' house because my mom had invited me for lunch, just something casual, nothing formal. She said she was making roast chicken and wanted to hear how things were going at the shop. I wasn't expecting much from the visit, just another round of polite small talk and maybe another sigh or two about how tough Melanie's life was. I pulled up a little early, figuring I'd beat the rush of any visiting relatives or neighbors they might have dropped by later. As I stepped out of my truck and walked up the short path toward the front door, I heard voices coming from the open kitchen window. I paused, not intentionally eavesdropping at first, but something about the tone of my father's voice made me stop. "He's doing well enough now. Have you seen the account balance he mentioned last time? He's more than stable." Then my mother's voice, softer, but with that clipped certainty she always used when something was already settled in her mind. "Well, of course he'll buy it for her. I mean, it's the right thing to do. She's struggling, and he's in a position to help. It's not even a question, really." My feet froze on the walkway. The words hit like a slow, sinking weight in my chest. Then my father again, this time almost chuckling. "I mean, come on. Travis has a house already. He has his own business, no kids, no partner to worry about. It's time he gives back a little. And it's not like we're asking him. He'll offer. He always does." The way they spoke, it wasn't hypothetical. It wasn't wistful. It was decided, like a plan already set in motion. Like they had taken my future and redrawn it to serve someone else's needs. They weren't wondering if I might help. They weren't waiting to see what I wanted. They had already put the weight of the solution on my back before I had even walked through the door. I stood there for a few seconds longer, heart pounding in my ears, before I stepped back and took a long breath. I didn't walk in right away. I couldn't. I needed a minute to process what I had just heard. It wasn't just the idea of buying my sister a house. It was the casual way they had decided I would. The certainty, the entitlement, the complete absence of even the possibility that I might have my own plans for the life I had worked so hard to build. They didn't know I was there. They didn't know I had heard. But in that moment, something shifted permanently inside me. I wasn't just their son anymore. I was a line item in their budget for Melanie's future. A walking, talking contingency plan they could tap into whenever life didn't go the way they thought it should for her. And the worst part? I realized they had never actually asked because they didn't think they needed to. The next day, I was at the shop finishing up a break job when my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on a rag, glanced at the screen, and saw Melanie's name. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. Her voice came through bright and cheerful, like she had just won a raffle. "Oh my God, Travis, I found it," she said, practically bubbling. "The perfect place. It's a 3-bedroom with a little patio and this cute breakfast nook. I'm obsessed. And the neighborhood is so quiet, like actual birds chirping quiet, not sirens, at 3 a.m. quiet." I didn't say anything right away. I just listened. She went on, describing the layout, the light fixtures, the color of the front door, even the way the driveway curved just slightly to the left. She was giddy, breathless. Then, as if she'd just remembered the part that involved me, she laughed. "And hey, you'll have your own guest room when you visit," she said. "Or, if your shop ever burns down and you end up homeless or whatever, you can always crash with your little sister." There was a pause. She thought it was a joke. She thought we were on the same page. That was the moment. Not when I heard my parents making plans for me like I was an account to be drained. Not when I first realized they'd already decided I owed her a house. Not even when my mother brushed off my years of hard work as being in a good place. It was right there, in the soft, smug laugh of someone who didn't even consider what she was asking. Because it wasn't a question. In her mind, it was already done. The house was as good as hers. I stared at the oil-stained floor of the shop, the socket wrench still in my other hand, and I felt everything inside me go still. Not angry, not shocked, just quiet, cold, settled. That was the moment I knew I was done. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not Melanie. Not even my coworkers at the shop. I had spent the last 6 months working in silence, finalizing paperwork, touring listings between jobs, crunching numbers late at night in my office with a calculator and a pen, the old-fashioned way. And then finally, without warning, I signed the papers. A modest 2-story on the edge of town, just enough land to breathe, with a garage I could convert into a dream workspace if I wanted. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors that creaked a little when you walked on them, and a small back deck where I could already imagine having a quiet beer after a long day. When I walked through the front door with the keys in my hand, it felt like crossing a finish line I'd been running toward my entire life. No one had handed it to me. No one had chipped in. No one had given me permission. This house was mine in the way that nothing else ever had been. Mine, from the chipped baseboards in the hallway to the uneven gravel in the driveway. I stood in the living room, light pouring in through the windows, and I smiled. Really smiled, for the first time in months. But the silence didn't last long. 2 days after I moved in, I got a text from my mom. Just a simple, new house, followed by a screenshot of a social media post made by Lacey, the realtor who helped me close the deal. I'd forgotten they followed each other. In the photo, I'm standing in front of the place holding a key with a ridiculous plastic tag that says sold, grinning like an idiot. Lacey had captioned it. So happy for Travis. One of the hardest working guys I know. Congrats on your first home. I stared at the screen, heart dropping. My stomach tightened. I hadn't told them for a reason. Within an hour, the group text lit up. My dad sent a thumbs up emoji and wrote, "Wow, looks like someone's doing well." My mom followed with, "We had no idea you were looking. Thought you'd be helping Melanie first." Melanie didn't message at all, but I saw the typing dots flash briefly, then disappear. So that was how the news broke. Not through a conversation, not because I wanted to share it with them, but through a post meant to celebrate something I had earned. And instead of congratulations or support, I got guilt, sarcasm, and silence. The weight of their expectations, once just a quiet pressure, now dropped like a stone at my feet. The call started that evening. First my mother, then my father, then both of them, alternating like they were taking shifts. When I didn't answer, the texts came, one after another, each one a little sharper than the last. "Why didn't you tell us? What are you thinking? We need to talk." I ignored them. I turned my phone face down and let it buzz on the kitchen counter while I unpacked dishes and stacked them into unfamiliar cabinets. The house smelled faintly of paint and cardboard, and for a while I let myself get lost in the rhythm of folding empty boxes and tossing them in a pile by the back door. Then, just after 9, the doorbell rang. I froze. I hadn't given the address to anyone. I peeked through the front window, and there they were, my parents, standing on my porch like they had every right to be there. My mom was still wearing her coat, her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself together by force. My dad had that rigid posture I'd only ever seen during his worst moods, the one he used when he wanted everyone to know he was done playing nice. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. That didn't stop them. My mom pushed past me without a word and stormed into the living room like she was walking into her own house. My father followed, slower but with a quiet certainty, like this was all some inevitable scene he had rehearsed in his mind. "You betrayed us," my mother said, her voice trembling, not from sadness, but from fury. "You knew what we were expecting. You knew what Melanie needed." She stood there, fists clenched at her sides, her eyes darting around the room like she couldn't believe what she was seeing, like she had imagined it differently. Maybe with her daughter standing beside me, smiling in victory, keys in hand. "I didn't betray anyone," I said, keeping my voice even. "I bought a house for myself. That's all." My father stepped in then, voice low and steady, the way it always got when he thought he was delivering some final, logical blow. "This family has supported you your entire life," he said. "You don't get to turn your back now. Either you give the house to Melanie, or you are no longer part of this family." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My mother's breathing was shaky. My father stared at me like he was daring me to argue. They both waited. I looked at them, really looked at them, standing in the middle of the first place that had ever truly been mine. And I saw not parents offering guidance or love, but people trying to strong-arm me into giving away everything I had earned to preserve a fantasy they had built around someone else. No, I said. Just that. No anger, no shouting, no apology. My father's jaw tightened. My mother made it sound like she'd just been slapped. But I didn't flinch. You don't get to make decisions about my life anymore. I added, still calm, still clear. You made yours. This one is mine. Neither of them spoke. My mother looked away first, her expression flickering somewhere between disbelief and disgust. My father gave one slow nod, like he was checking a box in his head, and then turned for the door without another word. She followed. The door closed behind them, and for a long while I just stood there, the silence pressing in on all sides. But it wasn't heavy this time. It was clean, final, and I was still standing, in my house, alone, but finally, for once, not invisible. The message came through just after noon the next day. I was eating lunch in the break room at the shop, scrolling absent-mindedly through my texts, trying to shake off the lingering weight from the night before. Then, out of nowhere, a notification from the family group chat lit up my screen. It was from Melanie. At first, I thought it was just another dramatic plea, maybe some emotional follow-up to my parents' visit, but the preview was strange. It was a screenshot, not a message, and it looked like a thread of text between her and someone else. I tapped it open without thinking. The moment it loaded, I froze. It was a screenshot of a conversation between Melanie and someone saved as mom. They were discussing me. Specifically, how to break Travis, in Melanie's words, so that I would give in and give her the house. She had actually typed it. We just need to break Travis down slowly. He always caves when he feels like he's disappointing you. If we all push just enough, he'll crack. He always does. Below that, my mother had responded. You're right. Guilt works best. Don't push too fast. He just needs to believe it's his decision. And there it was. No metaphor, no subtext, no plausible deniability. Just a clear, coordinated plan to manipulate me into giving away the one thing in my life that was fully mine. My mother and sister, working in tandem behind the scenes like it was a chess game. Like I was just some stubborn piece on the board. About a minute later, Melanie unsent the message, clearly realizing what she had done. But it was too late. I had already taken a screenshot, then another for the rest of the thread, just in case. No part of me hesitated. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel betrayal, at least not the kind that stabbed like it used to. What I felt was clean, cold, final. For the first time in my life, everything was laid bare, not through tone, not through hints, not through whispered suggestions or raised eyebrows across the dinner table, but in writing. In her own words. A blueprint of how they had always seen me. Predictable, pliable, useful. I saved the screenshots to a folder on my phone. I didn't respond to the group chat. I didn't write back. I didn't even acknowledge what I'd seen. I just sat there in that cramped break room, sandwich half eaten, staring at my phone with a kind of stillness I'd never felt before. I wasn't broken. I wasn't wounded. I was awake. And I was done pretending not to see who they really were. A few days after everything, after the texts, the confrontation, the message Melanie tried to pull back but couldn't erase, I decided I was done staying quiet. I had spent years keeping my head down, letting them write the story while I played the role they handed me. That was over. I stood in front of my house just as the sun was starting to set, the sky behind it burning orange and pink, and took a photo. Nothing fancy, just me on the front steps, arms crossed, the front door slightly open behind me. I captioned it simply, without drama, without name-dropping anyone. Finally home. I got here by myself. I hit post and slid the phone into my pocket. Within an hour, the likes started rolling in. Then the comments. Old friends from high school, college classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, former coworkers, even a few customers from the shop. They all chimed in. You deserve this, man. Proud of you. Knew you'd make something great. Built, not handed. Message after message came in, some short, some long, but all of them honest. It was the kind of response I'd never gotten from my own family. Genuine respect. Not because I was useful, not because I had done something for someone else, but because I had done it for myself. The next day, I got a message from someone I didn't recognize right away, one of Melanie's friends, I think from her college circle. She said, "Hey, just saw your post. I didn't even realize you were doing that well. That's awesome. Kind of crazy you bought a house before your sister though, right?" She always made it sound like she was ahead. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. A few hours later, Melanie called. I didn't answer. Then she texted, and this time there was no fake warmth. No emojis. No soft manipulation. Just, "What the hell are you doing?" Followed by, "You made me look like an idiot. Everyone keeps asking why I haven't bought a place if you could. They think I'm lazy." That was the moment I realized how much it had all depended on silence. Their version of me only worked when I didn't speak for myself, when I didn't show anyone what I had actually been doing all these years. The second I stepped forward, even just a little, the entire illusion started to crack. I didn't write back. I just left the post up. The notifications kept coming, but I didn't post it for the attention. I posted it because it was true. I got here by myself. And now, everyone knew it. I didn't plan to post the screenshots. At first, I thought saving them was enough, that just knowing the truth was power in itself. But after that last message from Melanie, after she tried to spin my quiet pride into an attack on her image, something shifted. She wasn't just upset. She was exposed, and instead of reflecting on that, she doubled down. And then I found out she had launched a fundraising campaign. Help Melanie get her dream home. A full-blown, public plea, complete with photos of her standing in front of properties she didn't own, talking about how hard it was for young artists to survive in today's economy. Donations, shares, hashtags, it was all there. She had taken the manipulation to a new level. And that's when I knew it had to stop. No caption, no commentary, no context, just the screenshots. I posted them on my profile. The full conversation between Melanie and my mother. The part where they plotted how to break me. The lines about guilt, about pushing slowly, about waiting for me to offer like I always had. I made sure the timestamps were visible. I didn't say a word. The reaction was immediate. The comments section exploded. People who had grown up with us, who had followed her art career, who had donated to her fundraiser, they all saw it for what it was. The tone changed instantly. This is disgusting. Unbelievable. So all that talk about struggling was just a setup? This family used this man like an ATM. I read every comment, not because I needed validation, but because for the first time, the truth was louder than the lie. Within hours, the donation page vanished. No explanation. Just gone. The link that had been all over her bio, her stories, her posts, deleted. People who had contributed were asking for refunds, demanding answers. A few even messaged me privately to apologize for not seeing it sooner. My parents didn't call. Melanie didn't either. I didn't expect them to. I just sat on the porch of the house I bought with my own hands, phone in my lap, watching the wind move through the trees. For once, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. I didn't need to yell or explain or justify. I had simply shown the truth, and it had done all the work for me. The message about the lawsuit came late at night, buried in a long email filled with vague threats and recycled justifications. My father had written it this time, trying to sound formal, invoking terms like defamation and privacy violations, even suggesting I could be held liable for damaging Melanie's reputation and, by extension, the family's name. It would have scared me once. It would have made me doubt myself, kept me up, pacing, wondering if I'd gone too far, if maybe I really was the one who'd stepped out of line. But not this time. Because this time, I had already spoken to a lawyer. I had already gathered documentation, saved everything, gotten everything checked, confirmed, and covered. Nothing I posted was illegal. Nothing I shared was doctored or twisted. It was their own words, unedited, unaltered, exactly as they had sent them. The lawyer's advice had been clear: they don't have a case. And even if they tried, all it would do is bring more light to the things they were now desperate to hide. So I didn't respond. I blocked the number my father used. I blocked my mother's too. I removed myself from the family group chat entirely. One by one, I cut the strings they had used to keep me tethered, not out of love, but out of obligation, out of control. And then came the last message from my mother, sent through email, subject line: please. The body of the message was only one sentence long. But we are a family. That was supposed to be the trump card. The final manipulation. The line that had always pulled me back before. No matter how much they demanded, no matter how little they gave, no matter how often they overlooked me, those 4 words were always the anchor they counted on. But when I read it, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, and most importantly, not guilt. I had walked through every stage of it. The confusion, the exhaustion, the desperation to be seen. And now, finally, the clarity. I didn't know them my future just because we shared a past. I didn't know them my house, my money, my silence, or my forgiveness. I had done what they never expected me to do. I had stepped out of their story and written my own. And now, I was free. Truly free. What do you think? What would you have done if you were in my position? Have you ever experienced something similar? Being used, manipulated, made to feel like your life belonged to someone else? Let me know. I'm genuinely curious how others would have handled it.